This episode explores what happens to decision making in real terms under sustained pressure, risk, and time constraints, and what we can do about it to ensure our decisions come from a place of clarity. Welcome to the big decision. In the previous episode, I talked about what makes a good decision. It wasn't outcomes, speed, or confidence. What underscores a good decision is judgment, integrity, and insight at the moment the decision is made. Today, I want to explore what happens to that judgment under pressure. Most poor decisions are not made by incompetent people. They're made by capable, intelligent, and experienced people whose decision-making capacity has been quietly compromised. Pressure is often misunderstood, particularly in working contexts. We tend to think of it as stress or workload or being busy. However, pressure is something much more specific. Pressure is the load of responsibility combined with the impact of the consequence, and that's usually under time and budget constraints. It's holding the sense that something very important is at stake and that getting it wrong will cost you personally and professionally, and as a team or organisation sometimes. I see this show up in both experienced and emerging leaders all the time. That cost might be financial, it might be reputational, it could be relational, it may even be psychological. The more senior that you become, the more often decisions can carry consequences that are not always evenly distributed. You might even be able to absorb the impact personally, but those around you cannot. And that awareness alone as a leader creates pressure. High performers are used to getting it right, and it can feel intolerable to get it wrong. Moreover, the organisational stakeholders may be perceived by the decision maker to have a low tolerance for what they perceive as wrong or suboptimal outcomes, even if that's not been made explicit and in fact in many cases is not even true. Amazon has a known leadership principle that leaders are right a lot. Not always, but more than they get it wrong. And this tolerance creates latitude and a certain freedom for experimentation. This is critical for leading big bets. This is a focused strategy when systemic change is at stake, as we also operated in my time with BT Global Services. Strong judgment, self-belief, and developed instincts are essential for navigating uncertainty. And leaders who are right a lot develop the ability to make the critical decisions that move the needle, even when operating with incomplete data or in ambiguity, which is often in innovation and founder-led environments, such as technology and finance. Pressure distorts that calm competence, and regulating our internal state as leaders is essential in those pivotal moments. What's important to understand is that pressure does not have to be dramatic to be distorting. It does not need to be characterised by raised voices or visible panic. Some of the most distorted decisions I see are made in calm rooms. They're made by people who appear composed, rational, and in control, yet internally something else is happening for them. Pressure often enters decision-making through fear, although it doesn't necessarily look like how we think fear looks. It's more subtle than that. It shows up as urgency, narrowing issues to the most simplistic. In pressure-led environments, there is a sense that there is no time to think. There can be a subtle but persistent pull to what feels the safest, quickest, or most controllable option. Fear of loss is another unseen and unspoken driver that is particularly powerful. Fear of losing revenue, fear of losing credibility, the fear of shutting down the unsuccessful product line or program, the fear of losing authority or position, the fear of being wrong in public, the fear of being exposed as not knowing. And essentially these consequences touch on our deepest fears of shame, humiliation, and not being good enough. This is evident in socially led environments and cultures. The best leaders can place this aside and lead from humility, and they have the security in themselves to understand that they do not need to know everything. If they have the best available data, they can instead use curiosity to explore further with teams and stakeholders, and then exercise their professional judgment. The best leaders operate in the certainty that in the majority of decisions, if they are wrong, they can course correct and it can be rectified over time. Fear has a very specific effect on how we think. We can't change it. It's biology learned over thousands of years. But we can notice it and we can pause when it appears. And then we can change our approach. And this is a mindful approach. So how does fear work? Simply, when your brain perceives threat, whether it is real or perceived, the amygdala activates. And the role of the amygdala is your survival tool, even when we are safely in a boardroom and there are no tigers. It is not concerned with long-term impact or strategy. It is designed to help you respond in the moment to perceived danger. It's not designed to help you weigh up competing priorities or to consider long-term consequences. When this system is activated, cognitive resources are redirected and the executive functioning path is closed when the amygdala path is switched on. The capacity that allows for judgment, nuance, impulse control, and long-term thinking is substantially reduced. Because this is a survival response, even though it isn't warranted, it makes you efficient in the wrong way. This does not make you irrational. Remember that this is biological. When this happens, the felt sense is that the time horizons are compressed. Everything feels urgent and concentrated in that moment, and your thinking becomes more binary. The tolerance for ambiguity drops, and the ability to hold multiple perspectives is lost. You become more decisive and judgmental and black and white in your thinking. What reduces is discernment and actual grounded wise judgment. Crucially, this can happen without any conscious awareness. You may not even be aware the amygdala is in control. You can sincerely believe that you are being pragmatic, rational, and objective, while in reality your decision-making has dramatically reduced in quality. Let's look at the reality in the boardroom. Most boards face external pressure. Accountability and regulatory scrutiny are on the horizon. Financial underperformance and share price volatility may be in play. Media attention, brand and client dissatisfaction issues could be shifting customer sentiment. The mood shifts when these things happen and fear enters the room. Conversations that were previously exploratory become challenging. Questions are asked out of defensiveness rather than genuine curiosity. What happens is someone proposes a course of action that offers an immediate relief. It seems to demonstrate control, it feels like decisiveness, and it will reassure stakeholders that something's being done. Happy days. And because we're human and we seek relief from discomfort, we take the easy and most simple option. And by the way, if you ever want anyone to agree with you, present it simply. Because everyone in the room feels the pressure, the simple option gains momentum. It's the panacea, it's the fix, it must be right. Not because it's the best option, because emotionally it reduces that discomfort in the moment. And people want to move towards relief in their nervous systems. It's natural. The problem hits when the longer term consequences emerge. People struggle to explain why the decision was taken. It felt like the right thing at the time. What they can't articulate or examine is that the reasoning was shaped by fear rather than judgment. I see this all the time overseeing technological transformation projects for major clients and brands. There's a project, there's a need to do something, but the team must sign it off by a particular date that's fixed because that's when the board meeting happens. And so a substandard solution is put forward with incomplete analysis of the problem to solve and how to solve it, just because we all need to be seen to be doing something or selling something or buying something or solving something. This is busy work without real impact, and sometimes it's causing harm to the business. The project gets incorrectly scoped in a rush. It doesn't deliver what's needed. The timelines are extended whilst the gaps are filled, and the costs spiral. The project is deemed as a failure. And I can tell you, I cannot name an organisation where this has never happened. I noticed this pattern 25 years ago, and my clients are consistently confirming that it continues to happen today, no matter how many sophisticated project management methodologies we use or KPI dashboards we review. It's the classic adage of act in haste and repent at leisure. But this behaviour blows budgets. Leadership loses trust as the workforce gets fatigued with yet another change initiative that doesn't work. And the leaders themselves lose confidence and sometimes their jobs, precisely what they were trying to avoid by the fear-based decision in the first place. And this is the critical distinction. Fear-based decisions optimise for relief, and regulated decisions optimise for outcome quality over time. Fear-based decisions answer the question, how do we make this feel less risky right now? Regulated decisions ask, what decision best serves the responsibility we're carrying, even if it feels uncomfortable? Let me give you another example. I worked with a client organisation which had faced sustained operational pressure. Targets were being consistently missed and staff morale was low. Projects were delayed and litigation from unsatisfied clients was being mentioned. Senior leaders were under increased scrutiny. The CEO was frantic. There was a growing sense that something decisive needed to be done. The proposed solution was rapid restructuring. It would demonstrate action, it would show control and decisiveness, and it would send a signal to the market. Clear leadership, or so they thought. Restructuring went ahead. The CEO could not be convinced otherwise, and in the short term it provided some relief. Leaders felt they had acted. External pressure eased slightly. Within months, the organisation was dealing with new problems. Capability gaps, loss of trust, increased attrition. The original issues were also still present, but now compounded and made much worse. When I was engaged, we slowed the conversation right down, and it became clear through the questions that I posed that the restructuring had been driven less by analysis and more by anxiety and emotional reactions, that quick decision-making that people so often praise. There was a certain ease to blaming certain individuals in the company and hiring and firing. There had been no actual meaningful examination of root causes or data beyond the sales and profit numbers, and the pressure to act had overtaken the need to understand. The data, when better questions were asked, showed different, simpler, and more effective fixes to the problems were possible by looking at and identifying the root causes of the issues. Structured project reviews, clear qualification and sales processes, introducing quality discipline and training. These things take more time and they're harder to do. But the impacts were material. 12 points of profit improvement in under a year and turnover up by 30%. Over time and through consistency, not immediacy. When fear is leading, action itself can become the goal. Then we can say, we did something. The decision at the outset was not irrational, it was fear-led. Let's look at another situation. Another senior executive I worked with was facing intense pressure to terminate a struggling business unit. It's completely normal in product and portfolio life cycles to do this. The numbers were poor and stakeholders were vocal, and the expectation was to cut losses and move on. The experiment and the investment was over. Instead of rushing, the leader created space, not endless delays, but enough of a pause to regulate their own thinking and the thinking of the team and those around them. And this leader used the time to ask different questions. What assumptions are we making? What options exist between keeping operating and choosing to close the product lines, and what would happen in a responsible wind down? What transitions would need to happen? The final decision was still difficult. It involved closure, it involved reassignment of job roles and responsibilities, but it was done with clarity and communication and care. People understood the rationale. Clients had clear communication and transition, and the organisation absorbed the impact without the additional reputational damage of confusion or blame. It was handled responsibly and with foresight. And that's the difference that a regulated and responsible leader makes. Regulated decision-making does not remove fear. Fear is a natural response to responsibility. Regulation allows fear to be present and allows pause to be taken. It doesn't allow emotional reactivity to drive. This is where many leadership conversations and decision-making go wrong. We tell people to be calm or to be resilient or emotionally intelligent, as though regulation is simply a personality trait. But it's not. It's a condition, and it's created over time through space, safety, and perspective. It's supported by governance and by culture and by having the right people in the room, allowing decisions to be held rather than rushed. We need to cultivate this regulation, this centering presence and capability in our leaders and in our teams. This needs to become the prerequisite in every boardroom and meeting room, and we need to stop placing reactive and bombastic leaders who shoot from the hip or the lip on a pedestal. I see far too many bright, talented people tiptoeing around insecure but powerful leaders who are using fear and force of personality to create rushed and pressured decisions and ultimately negative organisational impacts. This limits market potential for companies, real financial performance, and it delays innovation and problem solving in real terms. This impacts clients, shareholders, and culture. Nobody's insecurity or ego should be running organisational decision-making. I also see the same patterns in founders and early-stage companies too. Early-stage founders often make fear-based decisions because fear is baked into the environment. Scarcity, chasing funding, uncertainty, personal financial exposure. They're laying their life's work on the line for scrutiny and judgment by others, and that's not an easy place to be. Decisions are framed as existential to business survival and success, even when they are not. So here's what I see in reality. Founders accepting the wrong investment terms because funding feels scarce and urgency is needed. They take on misaligned clients because revenue and proof of concept also feels urgent. Overpromising because saying no feels too risky and then under-delivering in execution phases, disappointing both themselves and investors. These decisions often feel deeply necessary to be taken quickly in the moment, but over time they distort the business and the outcomes. Founders who learn to regulate their decision-making do not become slower. They become more precise and more effective. They can distinguish between a genuine risk and a perceived threat. The most successful learn when urgency is real and when it's a symptom of anxiety and needs deeper thought. And the same applies in our personal decisions. In our personal and family relationships, decisions made from fear rarely hold. Staying because leaving feels unsafe, leaving because staying feels intolerable, financial decisions made under pressure, parenting decisions made from anxiety rather than values. The nervous system doesn't distinguish between business threat and personal threat. The same survival mechanisms apply, and sometimes people are dealing with personal and business decisions in the same day. As leaders, we must be mindful of that too as a factor when someone is showing up under stress or making decisions that feel incomplete. One of the most damaging things we can do to ourselves is to make permanent decisions from temporary states. Regulated decision-making is not about being calm all of the time. It's about having access to your full cognitive and emotional capacity when deciding. To help ourselves, we can set time limits and time windows. We can create the space for thought and exploration and build this into project timelines. No great decision was ever made from a place of fear or anxiety. Great decision making is about being able to hold uncertainty without defaulting into urgency. We must tolerate discomfort long enough to let it settle and to then see clearly. The greatest leaders and founders will build choices based on responsibility and impact rather than the relief of getting a decision done. Fear-based decisions often feel decisive. Regulated decisions often land more quietly. But the quiet and considered decisions are often the ones that hold over time. So if you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. The quality of a decision is directly linked to the state you are in when you make it. If you are exhausted, fearful, cornered or overwhelmed, your decision-making capacity is already under constraint. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. The work is not to eliminate fear. It's to recognise when it is present and to create the conditions where it does not take the lead. Because when outcomes matter, the difference between a decision that relieves pressure and a decision that creates value over time is everything. In the next episode, we'll look at a different but equally challenging reality, what it means to make decisions when the information is incomplete, when certainty is not available, and when the responsibility still sits squarely with you. And that's where judgment becomes most visible and leadership truly shows. Thank you for listening and make great decisions.